Just a quick video today on something I've been seeing lately in the comments. I only started this channel about a year ago, but I've been writing on the Amish for over 15 years now, and I've seen this comment in different forms, pretty much that whole time. Comments on my website and other places. I think the main reason people say Amish are hypocrites usually has to do with seeing them use technology in different ways. This really, I think, has to do with a misconception. People think that the Amish believe tech is evil, or that they're not supposed to use any of it at all. Kind of an extreme, view of the Amish. But they miss the point that the Amish don't think in that way. They're not saying technology is evil. They're not saying cars or electricity or even, the internet are evil. They're just more careful about how they use those technologies and how they permit those technologies into their, homes and their communities and so forth. Rather than just accepting every technology and using it to the hilt, they look at what are the implications of this? How could this affect our community? Yes, this technology has a great benefit, but could it have a negative impact on the family? So, for example, the Amish recognize the car is very useful in some ways. Obviously, beats the horse and buggy if you need to go from Pennsylvania to Indiana, or even commuting to work, which some Amish have workplaces that are an hour or 2 hours away by car. They're just not doable by buggy. In emergency situations as well, getting to the hospital quickly if there's an accident. They draw the line when it comes to really to ownership and to operation of the car. And why do they do that? Well, they see that the car can disrupt the family and the community. And, how does that happen? Well, when you have a car parked in your driveway or multiple cars, it tends to make you be less dependent on the family, on the community. It takes you away from the community, can take you to the city. The Amish see, using the car in the way that the rest of Americans use it could damage their families and their communities by essentially pulling them further apart, making them less kind of connected and independent. But at the same time, again, they see the need for limited, let's call it even targeted use. So you have things like Amish taxis or Amish Uber, as it's called in some places, which are drivers who make a living driving the Amish places, sometimes on shopping trips, sometimes to visit relatives. You also have Amish riding with Amish friends, even Amish business people hiring non-Amish employees as drivers. A lot of Amish contractors, builders do that. Most Amish will permit that sort of use, the vast majority, not all, but the vast majority. Another thing, the internet. Why don't the Amish want the internet in their homes? One reason is that there are bad things online that they don't want their children accessing. But it can still be useful for business and making a living for their families as a way to reach customers. They're not looking at it in itself as evil. It's another tool, and it's kind of how you use it, having some rules that are agreed upon by the church. And again, this is not just, random decisions of a bishop. The rules are agreed upon and reaffirmed twice yearly in each Amish church. And sometimes the rules change over time, right? Sometimes what's allowed changes. And of course, some Amish are going to be more strict about where they draw those lines than others. Sometimes people compare Amish groups and they say, well, this Amish group doesn't permit the technologies, the solar panels that group permits, or the tractors, or whatever it might be. So they must be, more Amish than the other ones. The Amish are a diverse group. There are conservative Amish and there are progressive Amish. Some Amish on one end of things look at the conservative Amish and they say, well, I couldn't see myself living that way because even for some Amish, the way the most conservative Amish live is, they may see it as kind of extreme, right? But it doesn't make them necessarily any less Amish than the other group, right? There's just different ways of being Amish. So I think people are kind of applying their own misconceptions about what the Amish think and what their motives are when it comes to technology. And then they're calling them hypocrites for that. If the Amish were condemning non-Amish people for use of technology, and saying they shouldn't use it, that would be one thing. Then I could kind of see that argument. But they're not doing that. They're not shoving their non-use or their restricted use of technology in our face and being all pious about it. Okay, that's not the point of why the Amish live that way. They're not evangelizing against technology. They're not trying to get us to live in that way either, or condemning us for using technology. Now, does this mean that all Amish people will always follow every rule of the church? And no, of course not. Sometimes some Amish people, individuals, will maybe use a technology that they're not supposed to, according to the agreed upon rules of the church, or they may go against the ordnung in some way. And then that becomes a matter for the church, for that person to either get in adherence with the ordnung as they promised when they were baptized into the church, or that person may eventually end up leaving the church. And that happens sometimes too. And also, it's not like they're going against some biblical commands not to ride in cars. Obviously, there's nothing like that in the Bible. So that's kind of another error people make, thinking that Amish rules are based only on Scripture. They're not. They're a response to how they see technology and modernity affecting the world, and trying to live in a way where they can, use some of those benefits, but being careful about it. So it's actually quite rational if you kind of understand why the Amish use technology in the way they do. This also doesn't mean that individual Amish people can't be hypocritical in some ways. Of course they can, just like any other people. But I'm talking here about this broad claim towards the Amish, usually based around how people see them use technology. And again, different churches will draw the line in different places. Some will permit use of technologies that others won't. Some Amish don't permit driving in cars unless it's an emergency situation. Some don't use solar power. Some don't use propane and natural gas refrigerators. They would just rely on ice cooling and other forms of cooling. Some Amish will allow a strip of rubber around their buggy wheels and others won't. Even things as basic as that. And there are different reasons for why. Now, some of those things are just tradition as well and why they stay that way, but that's also another topic that I will get into maybe in another video. So in a nutshell, whenever I see this claim that the Amish are hypocrites, it really just tells me the person making the claim doesn't really get why the Amish live as they do and why they make the decisions about technology that they do. But if you understand that, it's hard to make that type of criticism. It's about being more thoughtful about how they use technology. It's not an evil thing. It can lead to evil if used incorrectly, just like any other tools. But the Amish are trying to be conscious about this and how they set standards and rules for their churches. So I hope that explains that. If you'd like to get more videos like this, hit the subscribe button and hit the bell so you make sure you get all the notifications. Thanks. I will talk to you next time.